Hello, I'm Mark Guiliana, and welcome to my episode of Vic Firth's Stories Behind the Sleeves. So, of course, it's very important to find the right stick for you. That's something only the individual can determine for themselves. I got really lucky that my first drum teacher, Joe Bergamini, put Vic Firth sticks in my hands, in my first drum lesson, and they felt right. I'm sorry if that's a little bit of a romantic story, but it's true, and really ever since then, they've continued to feel right. So in some ways, sticks really are a tool to get the sound that you want from this instrument. So I think a perfect situation is they're helping you create that sound, but in some ways they're also invisible and transparent. You almost don't even know they're there because they're so comfortable. In a best case scenario, the right stick is absolutely an extension of your body, for sure. Today I'm using the 5A, and again, this is the first drumstick that I ever played, and I return to it often. I love to explore different models, and different models usually inspire different musical choices and creativity, but really the 5A continues to just be a safe home, musically, and very, very comfortable. And usually when I veer off from a 5A, it's always in relation to a 5A. So quite often I'll use an 85A, which is just a bit smaller. I believe, in my mind, I think of the 85A as a little like a diet 5A. Yeah, the 5A, I assume most people who are watching this have played a Vic Firth 5A, and so you'll know what I'm talking about. It's quite standard, but really comfortable, and that's what I was playing today. So in my bag today, this beautiful bag, I have a wide variety of sticks. They all, like I said, they all hover around the 5A, but the subtle differences really do change my approach as the sensation in my hand changes. It does trigger some different ideas or some musical choices. So these are a bunch of 5As over here, but you'll notice I have some white ones and some black ones. And although they're the same stick and have the same dimensions and the same weight, visually, this almost suggests that some different choices should be made. Quite often, I want to wake up a bit and make sure I'm present and in the moment, and sometimes it'll take even a visual cue to say, hey, be here, and you're holding this stick that has the black finish, and maybe I'm playing with the butt end. And often I like to dedicate one pair of sticks in my bag to play backwards, because if I go back and forth, I don't like holding on to the chipped shoulder. So these are some 5As. This is a secret weapon of mine. It's still a 5A, but it's maple. So what I like about this is the weight is quite different. These are lighter. Maple is typically lighter, but the diameter is the same. So the experience in the hand is similar, but a lighter stick. So I think if I wish for a lighter stick, I usually reach for a smaller model, but this is nice to maintain that diameter and that, comfortable sensation in the hand, but to have a lighter stick. I have a pair of the Freestyle 5As in here as well. Normally I can't play a stick longer than 16 inches, which the 5A is. It just kind of takes me out of out of my comfort zone a bit. But again, sometimes that's the point, to get taken out of your comfort zone, wake up, make new choices for that moment. So these are quite long, and I do like to choke up on the stick from time to time, so this lets me take advantage of that. I have some Steve Gadd brushes in here, which I really like. The tips are just a little bent, so slightly less chance of getting them stuck in the wherever they're going. And anytime I can, be thinking about Steve Gadd while I'm playing drums, hopefully it leads to a more musical choice. Thank you, Steve. I really love the Peter Erskine ride stick. This is a very unique tip, very small, and the cymbal sound is great, and it just feels very, very comfortable. Great balance. I also have his big band stick in here, which is a slightly bigger version. I have the SD2 Boleros, which is a maple stick and quite a bit bigger diameter, and this produces quite a different cymbal sound. Usually you get a bit more attack, a bit more of a knock, and I know one of my favorite drummers, Brian Blade, often plays with these, and he has really warm, dark cymbals, and the sound, of course, it's Brian's playing that is that is doing the work, but with this stick, I've found it really gets you a bit closer to that warm sound. And then I have some 85As, as I mentioned. I have some mallets in here, which is kind of the SD2 with a mallet on the back. And then finally, I have these Ralphie Jr. sticks for the pad. To me, they're the closest to a drum set stick of the marching line, and they just feel really balanced. And again, I like being on the pad. I like being reminded that I'm in a slightly different space, and it's like, why am I holding this stick? Oh, right, I should be practicing. It's a nice kind of visual reminder. So that's what's in the bag today. So today I'd like to talk about some orchestration ideas, and more specifically, ways to really try to get the most out of the instrument that you have. As you can see, I like to play a pretty minimal setup, and my setup changes for the different musical situations that I find myself in. But quite often it resembles something close to this. Sometimes I'll have a rack tom and maybe another cymbal. Sometimes I might not even have a floor tom, and it's really, I really always make those choices based on the music. And I try to figure out what the music needs and provide that, but otherwise I actually get really inspired by these more minimal setups. And by having less, it actually encourages me to explore as many different sonic possibilities within each individual instrument. To be honest, I learned when I was younger, when I had quite a bit bigger setup, whatever was in front of me, I was going to hit it, whether it was right for the music or not. So I learned by starting to remove things, remove different instruments, I didn't always miss them when they were gone. So it helped me, but I still wished for this wide variety of sounds. So I started to look for it inside of what I had. So really today, I'd like to focus on the bass drum, the snare drum, and the hi-hat. And specifically, the combinations of those three. Of course, I think we're all, I assume we're all comfortable with playing different ideas with the bass drum, playing different ideas with the snare drum, playing different ideas with the hi-hat. But I've spent a lot of time focusing on the combinations of these sounds. So although we only have 3 instruments, bass drum, snare drum, hi-hat, we actually, if we include the combinations of the sounds, we have 7 sounds. We have the 3 individual sounds, and then we have 3 groups of 2. So we have the bass drum and the snare drum, we have the snare drum and the hi-hat, we have the bass drum and the hi-hat. So that's 3 more. And then finally we can use all 3 voices to get a new sound. So that gives us our 7 sounds. So when I'm practicing a new rhythm or looking for new ideas, quite often I'll use these 7 sounds as a reference to try to make sure it's not enough that I could just play a particular rhythm with the bass drum. I want to make sure, can I play it with all 7 sounds? And if I can, then that proves to me that I own this rhythm a bit more. And I'm most likely, I'll have more confidence to make a choice like this, use this kind of rhythm in a musical situation. Also, a lot of the music I play includes lots of improvisation. The music you hear in this video with Stu and with Nick, that was completely improvised. We entered the studio today with no preconceived ideas other than, hey, let's just play and listen and have fun and try to make some music that is unique to this moment. So that's another guiding light in my practicing, is I don't want to only prepare specific patterns or ideas that can't be changed. I'm actually trying to focus more on the bigger picture conceptual ideas so that I could bring those tools with me to an improvised situation. So we'll make sure with this concept, with the 7 sounds, we'll include improvising. So just quickly, I'd like to play, first let's just get to know the 7 sounds. So of course, so that was the same rhythm, but presented 7 different ways with 7 different sounds. So already you'll notice that subtly each sound does have its own character, and therefore will have its own unique effect on the music. So by having access to each of these different ways of playing this rhythm, I can hopefully, in a musical moment, have the ability to quickly choose and decide which presentation I think is best in that moment. So just quickly, a nice way to work on these things is to go through, let's focus on 16th notes for the sake of conversation today. And as you may know, there are 16 different ways to play one beat of 16th notes. You can play all 4 notes, 1 E and A. You can play 3 notes, and there's 4 different ways to do that. 1 E and, 1 and A, E and A, 1 E A. Pardon me if I'm going quickly, but I trust that you've spent time with these possibilities. There are 6 2-note options. 1 E, E and A, 1 A, 1 and E A. So those are the 6 2-note combinations. And then of course you have 4 1-note possibilities. The downbeat, the second 16th note, the third 16th note, the fourth 16th note. And please don't forget, please don't forget, the final option, the 16th possibility, is to play none of the notes. So that is a rest, but I promise that quite often that is the best musical choice. Sometimes we forget that that's such a significant option, but I absolutely include playing 0 notes as valid as any of the other rhythmic possibilities. So today, let's focus on the 2-note possibilities. So we have 6 of them, and I'm going to go through and play those on all 7 sounds. When I'm playing, whatever limbs aren't being used for the sound, I will use those limbs to accompany whatever sound is going through the different rhythmic possibilities. So for example, when I'm playing the bass drum, I'll play 8th notes on the hi-hat and 2 and 4 on the snare drum. If I'm not playing the 16th note variations with the bass drum, I'll play all 4 quarter notes, and so on. So I hope you can follow this. Wish me luck. I'm going to go through all 7 sounds, but I'm going to play those 6 2-note possibilities with each sound. Okay, I made it. So really, this is a brief insight into the way that I'm trying to create more possibilities with just these three instruments. And of course, that's only dealing with one beat of 16th notes at a time. That was very much an exercise. I apologize if it was a little dry, but I've found, that's, for me, that's the best way to really internalize a concept. And then that way I can bring it with me into a musical situation and hopefully be a bit more creative. As we really start to internalize how these things feel physically, to really, I know speaking for myself, the sound of the bass drum and the snare drum together was very difficult in the beginning for me. It was difficult for me to really get one sound. Quite often it would be more of a flam, which could be a good musical choice if you intend that. But to really work on getting a unison sound when you are playing things together is time well spent. And if we use the same model of the limbs that are not experimenting with the rhythm, if those are more of an accompaniment role, now rather than playing through a very particular exercise and a sequence, let's allow that voice to be the improviser. So I'll give you an example of that. Now I will allow the bass drum to be the improviser, and the hands will accompany that. So it's a very, very brief example. I should say that I'm fast forwarding through years of practice. The freedom of the improviser is something I'm still in search of, and it's something I'm still really working on. But it's through this kind of practicing that I'm trying to prepare myself to be more free and more confident in a musical situation. If we allow the snare drum to be the improviser, and just to clarify, for the sake of example, I'm only using 16th notes. I'm only choosing from the 16th note possibilities. Now the left hand will improvise. Now let's let the hi-hat be the improviser. Now the bass drum and the hi-hat together will be the improviser. So the only accompaniment will be the backbeat on 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, the next one would be the hi-hat and the snare drum together. So it'll just be 4 on the floor. Now, the sound that I was mentioning before that was the trickiest for me in the beginning is the bass drum and snare drum together. So I'm just going to play 8th notes on the hi-hat. okay? And finally, all three sounds together. So maybe for this example, or for this improvising, I'll just play quarter notes with my left foot on the hi-hat, and I'll move the right hand to the bell of the cymbal. But I'm only allowed to play all three voices together, but I can choose from any of the 16th note possibilities. Again, I apologize. I'm fast forwarding through many nuances, many failures over the years at home, but I'm just trying to get this in your hands as clearly as I can. And really, please take your time and make your own way with this stuff, because it's intentionally not too specific, especially the improvising. That's your chance to really get to make your own choices. I think very structured practice is important, but for me, I always need to leave room in my practicing for improvising and exploration and just really leaning into the creativity to try to develop those muscles as well. Because again, when I enter into a musical situation where I need to improvise, I'm going to need to be able to find ideas like this, or any ideas of any kind, at any moment. And I'm just trying to be listening as hard as I can and connected to the other musicians and reacting and responding. And, the more of these tools I can have at my disposal, the better. Maybe I'll do a little improvisation on the bass drum, the snare drum, and the hi-hat. And I'll have the idea of the 7 sounds in the back of my mind, but I'll definitely, as you get more comfortable with this concept, it's simply the awareness of these possibilities that hopefully will open the door to a more expressive approach with less. Okay, so at some point, in many different ways, those 7 sounds were represented. And that improvisation was structured mostly within a 16th note world, but I certainly wasn't afraid to leave that and venture into different rates. And of course, today in this mini lesson, we focused on 16ths, but as you can explore these possibilities with triplets and 16th note triplets, or wherever you want to go, if you're brave enough to venture around, you will only accumulate more and more and more individual, unique musical possibilities. And you just put those in your bag, and you don't worry about exactly how they're going to come out. You don't worry about exactly how they're going to be used. You want to save those choices for the music and for the musicians that you're playing with, and try to make choices unique to that moment. So I hope this is helpful. Again, this is just a very, very small glimpse into this world, but please, if this is inspiring for you, or if you feel like you could use some of this in your own playing, I know for me, I can't vouch for it enough. It's brought me to some great musical places, and yeah, have fun. finding one's own unique sound, I think, is something that any serious artist is interested in. And certainly for me, and I feel like it's a lifelong journey, and I'm in some ways just beginning to discover what that might mean for myself. When I was younger, I used to think about it more, and I used to try to make decisions with that as the goal. And whenever I tried to do it proactively, I inevitably failed. I thought, oh, I need to be unique. I think a lot of people sometimes couple the idea of individual sound with unique. And sometimes going out of your way to be unique could potentially be a distraction from truly finding out exactly who you are. So I think my younger self, and in weaker moments, my present self, I think, that feels a bit like a materialistic goal. And sometimes I would say, okay, I'm going to go to the hardware store and I'm going to buy this weird stuff and put the garbage can lid as my cymbal and a bucket as my snare and this here, my djembe as my floor tom. And then I'm that guy. I'm unique. I'm the guy with that setup. So all I had to do was spend $60 and now I'm unique, but there was no depth to that uniqueness. So I actually realized that it was more so allowing, instead of trying to create a brand new expression, I realized that the way to find myself was to truly try to represent all of my influences. And what is unique to me or to you is the recipe of your experiences and your influences. So I felt like some pressure came off my shoulders of not having to create this brand new expression every time. And it was more about, hey, do your best to represent everything that has happened to you, everything you like, everything you don't like. Put that through the music. And when you can do that in an honest way, that's when you actually become yourself. And that's when you represent yourself in the music. So personally, for me, I felt like looking back, I was thinking about this in the entirely wrong way. And now my goal is to just be a representation of all of my influences. And when I can do that and also play what's best for the music in that moment, you don't want to force your influences into a situation where they don't belong. I think when those things can come together in a natural way, that's when you're expressing your own voice. Dynamics are one of the most powerful tools we have, and it's amazing how expressive even the same idea can be played at a wide variety of dynamics. I'm always trying to make my louds louder and make my softs softer. Usually it's easier to make your louds louder, so you don't always have to work on that. But I've spent an incredible amount of time really trying to make my softs softer and softer and softer and softer. I really think that there's this whole world of music hiding in those quieter dynamics that doesn't get as much love as the louder dynamics. And especially on acoustic instruments, there are sounds and nuances and tones that are only accessible in those really quiet zones. And as we were talking about the use of different sticks, particularly if I'm in a situation where I really need to be playing quietly, I will make sure I'll do some experimenting and figure out what stick will allow me to have the most freedom in those quieter dynamics. A particular balance or a rebound or a certain tip. But for me, I can't recommend this exploration of quiet playing enough. It's still something that brings me so much joy, and it just forces you to listen. I think I love loud music. I grew up on Nirvana and Soundgarden and all those guys, so I love that. But there's something about playing quiet that forces the listener to almost lean in a bit and say, what what is that? Wow, where's that sound coming from? What's this? And if you could get the listener to lean in, and you could get them in your hands, then you can go anywhere. You'll always be able to reach for those louder zones, but I really think investing in being able to play quiet will really open a lot of musical doors. My number one suggestion to get more comfortable playing quiet is to play with other people in a situation where you need to play quiet. I think it wasn't until I started playing with other people that I realized really what playing quiet meant. I was at home in my room and I'm thinking, yeah, this is quiet. And then I would get to the gig and realize I'm nowhere nearly as quiet as I need to be. Everyone has their own definition of quiet. My goal is to have the quietest definition of quiet of all the musicians on stage. So when we need to go there, I'm still relaxed. I'm never playing my quietest because the music might not need to go all the way down there. But you never know what room you're going to be in on a given night. Sometimes you play a backbeat on a snare drum in a certain hall and it lasts for 12 seconds. And you're like, well, okay, I can't play at that velocity. So yeah, I really think, and I'm not going to lie, the other musicians you're playing with will not be mad that you're able to play in a quiet and sensitive way. Now, that being said, the challenge is to still play with great conviction and great energy. And some of my heroes really embody that. Sometimes if the volume comes down, the energy comes down. That happens a lot in music, which is okay too if that's what's appropriate. But you don't want that to be a default. So the ability to kind of unhook the energy and the dynamics, so that wherever you go dynamically, the energy is still on fire. The first guy that comes to mind in this moment is Jeff Ballard, one of my favorite drummers, and I've seen him play so many times. And the energy that he can embody at those quieter volumes is just staggering. I have to say a big thank you, as always, to Vic Firth and to you for watching this episode of Vic Firth's Stories Behind the Sleeves.